Hi, this is Anna Jadi with DearArn. Today, I want us to look at the reason, and I would look at it from an article that I've titled, "Is There Not a Cause?" That phrase is actually taken from the Bible. And I'm reading an excerpt from the book, Strength for the Journey by Ann Ajadi. The patriarch needed to ensure his boys were all right on the battlefield. He had been receiving some revelations that he did not quite understand what to make of them. He kind of felt that God was about to do something that involved his household. He just was not sure, so he decides to at least ask after his boys. He sends another boy to take some food and ask after their welfare. At least from the report, he will know what was going on. The Israeli army gathered every morning. These Philistines have been a big problem, and even now they had no clue how they were going to get out of the quagmire they found themselves in. Every time they gathered, they retreated in fear and dread of the enemy. Oh, that God would send salvation, they prayed. Many hearts were faint. The king was proffering no solution, and the enemy was not relenting. Dave was on a mission. His mission was to take bread to his brothers and inquire after their welfare. He had a sense of destiny and felt an inner nudge that this was a life-changing trip. For such a simple errand, yet he felt the pull of destiny. Remember, the prophet had visited a while ago, pronouncing him God's chosen. What was the essence of the oil if there was no throne? It was all a puzzle, but he still had to run the errand. Big brothers, men of war, trained for battle, but not battle-ready. What is the purpose of the stature if all they did was impress? No sense of destiny. They were small boys in big boy bodies. All there was to them was dream about being in the army of Israel. The king had all the sophistication and all the armory, but his heart was feeble. How do you fight and win when you already lost the battle within? The Philistines, Israel's sworn enemy, needed to show again that they were more powerful. Their main weapon was intimidation. Their point man was a giant, well-trained soldier, fully equipped and ready to take the spoil. Unknown to him, that day was a day of whooping. God, the master strategist, able soldier, captain of the host, had his own agenda. And his agenda was simple: humiliate the enemy once and for all. David shows up behind the battle lines, hears the pronouncements by the infidels, feels the fear and dread in his own people, and feels the revolt in his own being. Did his people not know who they were? Were they not in tune with who was truly in charge? Why fear who was obviously mincemeat? You wonder how he knew? Nobody defies God Almighty and goes scot-free. They usually live with a whooping, and this one will be the latest whooping. Why were his people so blind? Did they not understand they were covenant people? He asked a few questions, and purpose took the front stage. He offers to go forward, and Big Brother challenges him. His reply sounded to me like this: are you so blind you cannot see? This is God's opportunity to prove himself. Do you really think this is about you? The fight is truly about who is the Lord, and God must be put back on the throne of the people's heart. And as the nation's God, there is a purpose. Open your eyes, brother, open your eyes. The king gets to know that there was a small boy asking deep questions. He invites him and guessed right. He was willing to let the small boy confront what the old battle-trained men could not. What was he thinking? Really, what was he thinking? Could it be that he thought nothing of Dave's life, or he was too beaten down to care? Long story short, the giant is brought low, a whole nation is whooped, the covenant is reinforced, God's people are free, but they still think it's about persons. The women sing their song and give trophies to men. The whole nation is not getting it. Shall we digress a bit? There's this folklore about the elephant and the blind men. They were given the assignment to go feel the elephant's body and report their findings. Of course, every blind man had his own perspective. Some thought the elephant was tough, others soft, others thought huge and rugged. A myriad of views. Bits of truth, but none was right. They all felt part of the whole, but to get the whole picture, you had to go into the mind of who ordered the quest and put together all the findings. Can I ask a few questions? Is there a possibility that we have all been interpreting a problem, an issue, and all we know are bits of the truth? Bits too small, we cannot cast them as truth. Is it even possible that we're totally wrong and we do not know? Dave was labeled naughty, proud, nosy, and all sorts of names that had no bearing with the issue at hand. The kings thought he was too young. Excuse me, was King Saul not surrounded by able soldiers? Was he not a man of war himself? What was his war strategy? Why did he not take down Goliath? Are we going to stop and query the master? Exactly what was in his mind? I'm just wondering. That story was taken from the first book of Samuel, chapter 17. It's a long story. You may want to go read it yourself. Chapter 17, verses 17 to 33. Now, David, at some point before now, had been anointed king. The prophet had pronounced him king. But the things that went afterwards was he was sent back to the backwoods of nowhere. He was sent back as a shepherd. His big brothers were men of war, and at this point in time, they were at the war front. Their father, like the story said, must have been feeling some kind of something was going on. He just couldn't place it. So David gets to go on an errand to go to the war front, ask after the welfare of his brothers. He went with bread and water, just some refreshments for his big brothers. David gets to the battlefront, hears Goliath, the big giant from Philistine, bellowing curse words at the people of Israel. And every time Goliath steps forward, the people fell backwards. One man was threatening a whole nation. How interesting. What was it about the covenant people that made them forget who they were? What is it about the enemy that makes it look like God's people were already defeated? I'm talking to you. What is it about the problem that makes it look to you that you are dead meat? Is it that you have forgotten that you are God's child? Is it that you have forgotten that God hates to be defied? Is it that you have forgotten that God is still the captain of the host? What is it that is intimidating you? David steps on the scene, asks, so why are you afraid of this guy? The big brothers could not understand. The men of war could not understand, because all they heard were words from the giant. All they heard were orders, curse words from the giant. All David heard was, this is a battle of the gods. What's challenging the gods that you carry? Hand that battle over to God. Because when David steps forward, he stepped forward wanting to defend the God that was being defied. He didn't take it as a personal war. He took it as, if I had to die for God, I would die for God. I will not stand here and have my God being defied. What's defying God in your life? Now, word gets to the king that there's one small boy that is asking questions. David gets to where the king was, and the king pulls his own armory, lands it on David, and so David could go and fight. Now, the question that comes to mind is, if you could fight with your armory, why didn't you fight with it since? You were the king, the commander of the army after all. What were you thinking when you were going to war? We don't know the answer. But we do know that when David wore it, he knew it was too heavy for him. That garment was much too much. The truth, David was used to practicing in the backwoods of nowhere. He said to the king, I killed the lion and the bear with my bare hands. The Lord who gave me the lion and the bear would also give me this giant. The truth is, you cannot come, just show up on the scene. You must have been practicing at the backwoods of nowhere. Nobody just shows up. If you see a giant slayer, they knew how to kill lions and bears. Saul obviously doesn't. Saul probably thought it was about armory. Bible says that some trust in chariots, some trust in horses, but we will trust in the name of the Lord. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The name of the Lord itself is a weapon of war. Now David pulls off the garment or the armory of Saul and decides to go with what he was used to, fighting with stones. Now anything, no matter how small, in the hands of God is a weapon. Don't forget, God fought with the breath of his nostrils. God fought with hailstones. God fought with water. God fought with wind. God can fight your enemy with anything. God fought with sound. Anything in God's hands, it's a weapon. David approaches the Philistines. The Philistine is insulted because David is a small guy faced with a giant. How can a small boy presume to fall a giant? That you can do if you have a giant God on the inside of you, small boy. David had said previously, say, is there not a cause? Any cause that defends the name of the Lord is a good enough cause. Now, what's the cause that you are fighting? What are you standing up for? Are you standing up for yourself, or are you standing up for the God of the land? Now, the story ends with David approaches the Philistines, brings down the head of the Philistines with one stone. My friend, what you have in your hand is strong enough to bring down the enemy. What you have in your house is strong enough to bring down the enemy. Now Goliath falls. The nation of Israel becomes free. David becomes a hero overnight. My friend, your turnaround is not a process. Your turnaround can be in an instant, just like that. And my prayer for you today is that the turnaround that you have been waiting for will come to you just like that. David was a shepherd boy. When he came to the battlefield, he became a hero by the time he was leaving the battlefield. The people still got it wrong. They were still giving glory to men. It was not about David. It was not about Saul. It was about God the Almighty. Is there not a cause? Go look for a cause that brings glory to God. This is Anne Ajadi.